Okay, welcome everyone. We'll let everyone get settled in for the night. What a fun crowd. This is amazing. Before we get started here today, I'm going to pass the torch to Joe to give some amazing gratitude for this whole huge group.
Yeah, we are so blessed tonight to have all of our students here to be serenaded by our pep band outside in the freezing cold. Now they've come in to warm up, and I want all of the students who are here tonight, you will remember this. You can't leave until you see Mrs. McCarrow in the back. That includes all of our band folks, because there is a selection of thank you items. And we would like to make sure that you know how much we appreciate you. So we have a little memento for you to take away. You have a choice. And I think the high school students may choose the pencil kit because it's really cool. Just kidding. But we have some water bottles and some mugs and really nice little a pencil kit. So you can go over and select something before you leave. It's really cool. It's got our logo on it. It's pretty nice. They absolutely can. I just wanted them to have the opportunity to hear a thank you from the administration and the school board for all of their hard work. And Mr. Harshman, thank you so much, and best of luck at your Clark College adventure. That's on the board's agenda tonight, so that will be wonderful. So I'm going to turn back to Ann and let her start the meeting. And if you guys could quietly go see Mrs. McCarrow and make sure you take something that you will enjoy. So, and yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Moshe. We'll go ahead and get started with our meeting today. We'll call this to order. Meeting of the Southwood Beach School District on December 14th. You may notice I am not Brooke Williford, so just take that in for a moment. He's on vacation with his family, so wish them safe travels and many happy adventures. He'll be back for the next meeting. We're also missing one of our student representatives this evening, Audrey Gamerick. So Katya, thank you for being here for the team. Appreciate it.
Audrey is online.
Audrey's online. Never mind. You're here. Hi, Audrey.
Hi.
I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Marnie Jackson for our land acknowledgement. Thanks, Marnie.
Thank you, Anne. Southwood Beach School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral homelands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish people on an island known in the Lushootseed language of the Coast Salish peoples as Chakolchi. This island where we now live and work was renamed Whidbey by a military sea captain. But before that event and before that name, this land was lived on and loved as it is lived on and loved now. And the peoples of the Coast Salish tribes have cared for these lands and these waters in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial. Respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and their sacred spiritual connections with the land and water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect for the Indigenous people of this territory and our gratitude for their enduring care and protection of this land which we currently occupy and share. The Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855, codified this opportunity to share this land and grow our relationships of respect between and with these tribes. So I do invite each and every one of us to take a look at that treaty and understand the commitments that it holds therein. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marnie. And thank you for that invitation to learn more and continue growing in that way. I appreciate it. Next, I just want to give some notes about public comments that are coming up later in the meeting. If you are online with us tonight, please do type your name and location in the Q&A feature as soon as you can, and that we will know who you are and where you are. And then when we get to public comments section, you'll be able to type in your comments. And if you're here live with us, Christy has a sheet in the back, and you can do the same and then give your comments live and in person here at the meeting. Moving on to the agenda and minutes. I will ask if there are any objections to approving the agenda and minutes as presented. Seeing no objections, the agenda and minutes will be approved as presented. Thank you. The next work we're doing this evening is our annual annual reorganization. Each of us has a job we do within our board member job. And our work tonight is to talk with each other and create some votes around who is going to maintain or take on positions within the board. So the way we'll do this, I watched Brooke do this last year on the video. And so we'll see if I can make it go. And Dr. Mosher, you'll help me if I get stuck somewhere. All right, the first election for officer is our chair, who's currently Brooke Williford. And now I will open up nominations for board chair for the coming year.
Clarifying question. Can we accept a nomination from our student board representative or an advisory nomination?
I just learned the answer to this question. Correct me if I get it wrong, but our student board representative cannot nominate you. I will ask for your advisory vote before the board members vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any nominations for board chair?
I nominate to retain Director Williford as board chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any nominations for board chair? Just a protocol, I will be asking 3 times because that's the standard procedure. So any nominations for board chair? This is the second ask. And third ask, any nominations for board chair? All right, seeing no more nominations, we will move to a roll call vote. Katja, what is your advisory vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Andrea, your advisory vote? Audrey's online, your advisory vote. I'm so sorry, Audrey.
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. Now, Andrea, your advisory vote or
Aye.
your actual vote.
Aye.
Thank you, Andrea. And Marnie,
Aye.
thank you. Joe?
Aye.
Thank you. And my vote is aye as well. Brooke Williford will stay in the chair position. Again, since he is away with his family, I will be continuing the meeting. Our next roll call vote is for vice chair, which is the role that I currently have. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Ann Johnson to continue as vice chair.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any nominations for vice chair? Okay. Any nominations for vice chair? And any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, we'll move to an advisory vote. We'll start with Audrey this time, so I don't forget you.
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. Katja?
Aye.
Thank you. Andrea?
Aye.
Thank you. Marnie?
Aye.
Thank you. Joe?
Aye.
Thank you. And I don't think I need to vote for myself, but I do accept the position. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to a next very important job, our legislative rep, which is all currently being held by Marnie Jackson. And so these do not need a roll call vote. So we will just do a collective vote on these ones, but I will ask for advisory votes beforehand. So legislative rep, legislative representative, I should say, do I have any nominations for legislative representative?
I nominate Marnie Jackson.
I second that.
Any nominations for legislative rep? Any nominations for legislative rep? And any further nominations for legislative representative? All right, let's move to a vote. All in favor of voting for Marnie? Oh, advisory vote. Thank you. Thank you for helping. Katja, go ahead.
Aye.
Thank you. And Audrey, your vote?
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. All right, and now we go to a vote. All in favor of Marnie Jackson maintaining her position as legislative representative, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Congratulations, Marnie. Thank you so much. Moving on to our WIAA representative. That is the person who works with our athletics and other organizations through the school district that work under those rules. Joe is our current WIAA representative. Will you tell us what that stands for, what that acronym stands for?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot.
I am.
Washington Interscholastic and Athletic Association.
Perfect. Thank you so much, because I couldn't remember, so I put you on the spot. But thank you, that's helpful. So again, Mr. Greenherron currently holds that position. We're now opening nominations for that position. Do I hear any nominations for WIAA representative?
I nominate Joe Greenherron.
I second.
Thank you. Any nominations for WIAA representative? Any nominations for WIAA representative? Any other nominations for WIAA representative? All right, advisory votes. Katja?
Aye.
Thank you, Katja. Audrey?
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. All right, moving to a no roll call vote. All in favor of Joe Greenherron keeping his position as the WIAA representative, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you, Joe. All right, Director Greenherron is continuing as that representative. Last representation is our policy representative, currently held by Andrea. And why did I just blank on your last name?
Downs.
Thank you, Andrea Downs.
Then we go Downs.
There you go. Okay, thank you, Andrea. All right, currently she holds the policy representative position. And now I'm going to open nominations for that election. Do I have any nominations for policy representative?
I nominate Andrea Downs.
Thank you for that nomination.
I second that.
Any nominations for policy representative? Any nominations for policy representative? Any other nominations for policy representative? All right, we'll move again to a no roll call vote. Advisory votes first, please.
Aye.
Thank you, Katja. And Audrey?
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. And now all those in favor of Andrea Downs maintaining her position as the policy representative, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you, Andrea. You are continuing as our policy representative.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all for being here for that. And I think that part's done. Yay, perfect. So we can check that off the list too. Moving now to approval of our consent agenda. And I have the wording right here. Are there any objections to approving our consent agenda as presented?
No objections, but I hope the band has fun at Clark College Jazz Festival.
Very nice. Okay. With no objections, the consent agenda will be approved as presented. Okay, moving swiftly on to presentations, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moshe to talk about what's next.
So as the board knows, we have been providing the board with presentations at every meeting. And tonight, you're going to hear about our electives. And I just wanted to clarify that the board visits our schools and will see our students in action. This is really an opportunity for us to showcase our students and all of the wonderful things that are happening. Tonight happens to be electives. We've done this with English and math and science and social studies. And tonight it's our electives. So the board will be making plans to visit our schools again in January when we get back. But for tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fankhauser, who coordinated this particular presentation, so he can introduce. We do have some slides up, and we're excited to see all of you. So, and don't forget to see Mrs. McCarroll before you leave.
I get a round of applause for that jazz band out there, the pep band doing an amazing job. I'm going to remind everybody that we are presenting to the board, but we have the PowerPoint presentation up here. So I'm going to get out of the way and invite Mr. Harshman to come on up And we're going to start with an amazing performance from our 5th grade band. Thank you for coming, everybody. And thanks to parents for coming out and bringing out your kids tonight. We really super appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to bring up some students from the 5th grade band who were beginners until Monday night, and then they graduated to the cadet band. So they've been playing since September. So how would you like them to face? Do you want them to aim for you or?
They should be presenting to the board.
Okay,
So
good.
yes.
So you're going to play that direction. Okay. And so we have Ramona on the end and Talia and Nico and Wyatt. And we performed Monday night. That was their first concert. And then we performed again this morning. It's been a very busy week. We performed again this morning for the kindergarten and 1st grade. Right? Okay. So they're going to perform for you a duet. And this is Jolly Old Saint Nick. Good. Start over. Okay. Bravo. So now let's do the bow. Let's do the bow. You ready? Ready, bow. 1 hippopotamus, 2 hippopotamus, 3 hippopotamus. Okay, you got it. There you go. Nice job. So again, Ramona, Talia, Wyatt, and Nico. All right. Thank you. Very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah. All right. And nice job today, Pep Band. Thanks for coming out in the cold and playing for these wonderful people. Who do I pass this on to?
All right, next up, as our slides advance, come on up, farm team. Mr. Freundlich, are you there? Where is he?
Thank you,
Come
Mr.
on up.
Hirschman. Put it up near your mouth and just talk.
Hello, my name is Cooper and I'm in the 4th grade. Hello, my name is Mercy and I'm in the 4th grade. Hello, my name is Riker and I'm in the 4th grade. Hello, my name is Brooklyn and I'm in the 5th grade. And we are here to presentate about what we do in garden class. I love garden class because I love being able to cook and also because I love being able to go outside and get some fresh air in class. My favorite thing about farm is that we get to harvest and eat the vegetables. My favorite thing about farm is identifying plants and animals. My favorite thing about farm is digging up potatoes. We learn teamwork when we do activities together like cooking and moving things around on the farm. We learn how to safely and effectively use sharp garden and culinary equipment like knives, shovels, and pruners. We learn how to multitask because we can chat with our friends while still doing good work. And finally, we get to feed ourselves and others with farm fresh food.
And we use the food grown in garden for culinary class, and this is the cycle. We start the plant, we plant the starts or seed and watch them grow. Then we plant the starts in the ground and keep watching them grow. And then harvest and cook in class. And finally eat and repeat. Let me again. In culinary this year, we spent a lot of the past couple months working on the take home Harvest Fest, which fed over 150 people. We also made pasta, tomato sauce, pesto, zucchini fritters, and corn tortillas.
What fun lessons do we learn on the farm? We planted the food forest, learned how to take care of it, and watch it grow. We learned how to make compost and mulch beds properly. We learn about planting seeds and watering the soil to watch the plants grow.
We harvested, drew, and used the indigo plants in the farm to dye silk scarves.
We do other fun farm art projects like seed art, painting rocks, and making clothes for the harvest. What makes our farm special? It is special because it gets a lot of love and care from students and teachers, and most schools don't have a school garden. It's very organized and clean, and we get to try and learn new things. Thank you for listening.
Excellent job. Thank you so much for telling us about your farm experience.
Mr. Freundlich, did you have anything you wanted to add or introduce your farm team?
Come on. There's a few of us you haven't met yet. Last time you met Grace here. And then we have Cersei, who you're meeting for the first time, and then our new farm manager, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. J.
I'm Farmer Jay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now we have the amazing Miss Zimmerman coming on up and talking about art with some fine young artists.
Thank you. My name is Natasha Zimmerman, and I teach art and music to K through 4 and art to 5 and 6. And we'll introduce ourselves first.
Hi, my name is Phoebe.
Hi, my name is Callie. Hi, my name's Adeline.
So coming off of last spring, we had a grant for some handwork supplies, and I don't know who's doing the slides. Okay, so I'll just raise my hand. So we've been using a lot of fibers material and collaborating with Jay in the garden. So the second graders did some flower pounding in the beginning of the year. And on the next slide of the video shows, it's a beautiful sound that was happening in the garden. Work. Well, they went out and they had to learn how to use hammers and not hurt themselves. And you can pound flower petals onto material, and it made this beautiful bamboo noise that was happening. So collaborating in the garden, we did that with the second graders with seed packets and flower pounding, and also the indigo dyeing. Where the students learned about the ancient art of Japanese indigo dyeing and some native traditional tying techniques. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, yeah, good. It worked. All right, so then next slide. And we have some seed packets for your garden to go home with you tonight. So I will bring those up to you afterwards. So the second graders all got to bring home seed packets and also provided some for the faculty as well. Next slide. So all of the grades just got done doing pottery. They are making pinch pots to bring home before the break. That's what we've been busy doing. And here are some slides of the various fiber arts that we're doing. Kindergarten and first are weaving, as well as fifth grade, and they'll be showing those to you in just a moment. And sixth graders are weaving baskets, and second graders are learning how to knit, making their own knitting needles and rolling their balls of yarn. And the other one is wet felting. So most grades will learn how to use wool fiber to felt into material. So that's what we've been doing this fall. And the students here, Ada, Phoebe, and Callie want to share with you why art is important and one of their favorite projects that they wanted to share with you tonight.
My favorite part about art is the pottery that we do because it's fun.
My favorite part is also the pottery because the painting is really fun and to see it come out of the kiln is really cool. My favorite part is also the pottery because like when you build it and then you put it in the kiln and it comes out as a totally different thing. We made like a color wheel and we used tracing and different colors. We used the colors of the color wheel and then we added white and black to make it darker and lighter. Yeah, so I want to share the color wheel. I did the same thing as Ada, but yeah.
I'm going to share the 6 points on the circle because it looks like an optical illusion.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much. And please make sure you see Mrs. McCarroll before you go. We really appreciate all of you coming here and sharing what you're excited about in school. Are we going with choir? Yay. Okay, Mrs. Letke choir.
Okay. Hello, I'm Livia Grimm. I am a senior at South Whitby High School. I am also the president of Music in Motion, which is the choir at South Whitby High School. Music in Motion is an all-inclusive choir, and we do songs from like all different kinds of genres, from folk songs to pop songs, all different kinds. We usually try to attend Western every year. Next slide, please. Sorry. We try to attend Western Washington University every year for their fall choral fest, which is a couple of choirs from all around Washington and the university's choirs, which I think they have 5 choirs, all in their giant like auditorium room, their concert hall, which is a really fun experience to go. So this year we went and we just were there. We got to school at 6:20 in the morning, took a bus to Bellingham, and we got to the college and we just right away started practicing with all of the different choirs. And it was just a really magical experience to get to go. And it just sounded so angelic. Next slide, please. We also went to Useless Bay Golf Course. They asked us this year to go for their Christmas tree lighting, their annual Christmas tree lighting. So once they lit the tree, we started singing for like a half an hour. And then they gave us food, which was nice. And so it was really fun. The parents, the residents of Useless Bay Golf Course also sang with us, which was really nice. It just was a really nice experience. I think that is all. So now we will sing a couple songs for you. Oh, our concert is tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the auditorium if you would love to go. Thank you so much. Should I face this? Like, I think you can put it right. Yeah. And then stand face. You can stand and face.
Okay, everybody ready?
Looking forward to Thursday night. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate all the work you've done. And we are on to art and ceramics and Val Hagenes.
We were saying how it feels odd to,
It
we're happy to
does.
present to you.
It does when you have an audience behind you.
All right, so I'm Valerie Hagenes. I'm the high school art and ceramics teacher. And listening and seeing the artwork from the youth, I'm super excited how many young students are excited for ceramics because we've got a great thriving program at middle school and high school level. So got Emery to speak to that. So I brought, I teach intro to art, advanced art. I have some independent study advanced art students. And then ceramics next semester, I'll also have advanced ceramics. So got a pretty full, full range. It's been really interesting because we don't have a comprehensive K through 12 program. And so this being my third year at the high school, kind of my first real one, I felt like I wanted to fill these missing pieces and kind of prepare students to become, ready for college level art courses. And I kind of had this moment just in reflecting, realizing that this might be the one art class that they have. And so if that's the case, what do I want them to come away with? And primarily confidence to be able to create, and just a lot of exposure to a variety of techniques and media. So that's been my focus. And so the students that I have presenting with me today are ones that have just really embraced the process. And they just have amazing enthusiasm and are just creative and inspiring me every day. So I've got Forrest. Well, why don't I let you introduce yourself? Maybe say what class you're.
My name is Forrest Erickson. I'm in the Intro to Art division. Do you want me to pass it down, or should I just talk about Intro to Art?
Well, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I've personally enjoyed just spending a lot of time doing things that I've never done before in art. This is my first art class that I've taken in school, and I really enjoy it. So learning to work with new mediums and new, forms of art, letting your creativity kind of flow with whatever form you're working with. It's really exciting, and it's really something that you get to have control over. I mean, certainly there's drawbacks with whatever form you're using, but it really allows you to work with what you got. It's so much fun. As you can see, we've done quite a few different work or pieces here, from our line unit to, we're moving on to shape. And yeah, it's just been a blast. I don't think I've had a class that's got me this engaged and this, motivated in quite a while. I truly enjoy this class. Oh, yeah. I don't know if we've got to that yet. Some perspective work that I really enjoyed doing. Some of my favorites was the piece on the right. I enjoyed doing works like that. Some prints and rubbings from around the school, basically using graphite and going into, things on the door or little wall outlets or this, that, and the other, and, rubbing off from them. Prints that we've done, those have been very fun.
All right. Hi, my name is Alex Velasquez, and I'm in the advanced program. So obviously to get into the advanced program, you have to go through Art1 or the intro projects. So I've already done that. And there is really not a large difference in the criteria or the units that we do. There's just a lot more freedom to express what you're feeling or what you feel is right with that certain project. I think I have a piece on here. I'm not sure, but these are some of the advanced pieces, and they're just, you can see like how they're more vibrant and how there's more expression in them. There's just, so in the intro units, there's a lot more structure just so you can know how you're like find what your medium is or what your groove is. But with the advanced, you get to have a lot more freedom in what you want to do, what you want to design. My piece is all the way on the right. It was our shading unit, I believe. There's a lot of flexibility too. So if you're not totally done with a piece by the end of the unit, then you can also progress on with that sort of thing. I'm not sure if there's another slide. Yeah, my piece is the little mushroom on the bottom too. Very cute. It's just, I've never had this much fun in a class before. I love art. It's always been my thing. Acrylic is my personal medium, but it's a very fun class, especially with Val being the director of the whole thing. Yes. All right. Another slide, I'm not sure. Yeah, these are not my pieces, but they're also beautiful.
If you don't mind. I'm Grace Miller. I'm in independent art study. It's kind of like art 3. I kind of made it up. So what I've enjoyed most about independent art is trying new mediums. And this is because I have access to them. And typically I would not have access to these medias. I would never just go out and buy a whole new set of art. I would never know I like enjoy a few things, such as oil pastels. I had no idea until last year. And it's really been rewarding to see myself progress and how my creativity has advanced and changed, such as in my oil pastels. The one on the right is my largest piece. And I've just really improved since my first one. Sometimes trusting the process is a little bit difficult. There's been some ugly phases, but I really enjoy independent art because I tend to dabble in different like projects while I'm working, but this has kept me focused. And so I can really see the project come together. And it's just a really like rewarding experience, because art is about creativity. And it's honestly just about the process, and it's about messing up, because messing up is a part of the process and it's a part of creativity. So this class has just really helped me, help motivate me to improve my skills, to take risks, and to pursue art.
Grace, can I just say that your artwork has been hung up in my office, and so I recognize the pieces from the hallways of my office.
That's up at the ESD in Anacortes, so that's pretty cool.
My name is Charlotte Tincher. I am also an independent art study student. I really like being able to do an independent study because, like Grace said, it gives you a lot more freedom, and you can explore a lot of different mediums that you normally wouldn't get to. Like, I pretty much just stick to graphite and sometimes acrylic, but being able to do this, I've been able to explore like different things. I did a lot of watercoloring for a while, which was really cool, which is something I had never really did before. Everything on the slide right there is mine. I tend to stick to equine drawing as I am a horse person. And the piece on the previous slide was also mine, that I did inspired by one of my favorite songs. I didn't. Yeah, I'm also in ceramics along with Emery, and ceramics is my first time doing ceramics, and it's been really fun so far. I've liked having the freedom with the projects. We can really kind of just make them our own, regardless of whatever the assignment is, which has been really fun. And I had minimal experience with clay before this, so it's been cool learning different techniques and like learning how to throw on the wheel and stuff like that.
So my experience with ceramics is rather similar to Charlotte's, except this would be my second time doing a ceramics class. I really enjoyed the class due to the lack of restrictions on what you can create. I, for one, enjoy the the like sculpting and gosh, I'm thinking of what to say next. Like the pumpkins up there, that was for a hollow form project that I decided to make a little creature with a very large mouth. For like, I really didn't have a plan for this speech.
Just take a breath and keep going, Emery. You're good.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, I was just explaining why I chose Emery for his enthusiasm and dedication to the medium. And he definitely pushes limits. And there's been a lot of failures, but I feel like he's learned from failures and then he'll go off and tweak and yeah. So you're doing great, Emery. And maybe I think there might be 1 or 2 more slides.
Yeah. So onto that, I have found myself getting really comfortable with making sculptures that look like they're 100+ years old, and I really enjoy the whole process. Really, there's not a single part I can pick out that I have more fun with than all of the other parts. Wheel throwing, I found substantially more difficult than hand building, but it yielded much better results that were a lot cleaner in shape and form. But hand building, you can do so much more in like asymmetrical sculpting than you can on the wheel, because wheel is spinning in a circle and you can only do symmetrical sculpting. So I like to make things on the wheel and then edit them to my heart's content off the wheel. Like recently, I made this hollow form on the wheel that was a ring, and then I took a chunk out the side, and then well, actually, there were 3 chunks of it that I took out. And then I took a small Sgraffito tool, which is used for those pots that have the bluer glaze with all the carved out designs. That's the Sgraffito method of glazing. I took one of those tools and a needle tool, and I kind of scratched away at it until it had all these little like scratch marks and holes in it, and it looked like it had been like buried in the ground for say 100 or so years. And the fact being that these pots will indeed last for 100 or so years. And I like to think that someday somebody's gonna find one of my creations, such as the snake with legs. And they're gonna be like, what is that?
Okay, so just from hearing all these other people talk about their experiences, it's just reminded me how much fun this class is and how much freedom there is, especially as an advanced student. I just feel like I have so much creativity like flowing through me, it's just so interesting. And especially with Val being so encouraging and giving suggestions and showing like other things that you could critique and find what would make the piece pop more. It's just such a fun class, and I really hope that I get to take it again my senior year as a junior. So thank you so much for making me feel inspired. You're so cool.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for all those presentations. Don't forget to see Ms. Macaro don't forget to see Ms. Macaro. She's got something for you on your way out the door.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Have a great holiday break. Dan, do you want to, I guess I should get up with you rather than stay here.
All right, for folks at home, we're in a little bit of a transition here. saying goodbye to our electives folks. Thank you so much again for your hard work and showing us your stuff.
I'd clear a room.
All right, so if you are here to listen to the bond presentation, this is the place for you to be.
Ask Jeff if she was in.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Moshe, and Mr. Pullman, and they're going to give us a presentation about our bond proposal in 2023. Thank you, Dr. Moshe and Mr. Pullman. It's a hard act to follow, my friends.
It is a hard act to follow, and we are going to try our hardest to do it. Looks like we cleared the room, though. We want to talk to you about something also important. We are, as the board knows, moving forward toward a bond vote. And it's been 30 years since the last bond vote in our district. And why a bond? So Dan and I had the opportunity to present to our faculty today, all of them, faculty and staff. And because it's been so long since we've had a bond, thought it would be prudent to talk about what a bond is. So a bond is actually a vote for a large amount of money all at once to do capital improvements. So when one does a bond vote, it is because you have big projects to do. A levy, on the other hand, like we have a capital levy and we have an EP&O levy. The EP&O levy covers things that the state funding does not cover, such as athletics and food service and staff beyond the prototypical model. The capital levy handles our technology and our maintenance on an annual basis. A bond is because we have larger needs. So the board set 3 goals in its strategic plan for the district. And the third goal is to craft and begin implementing plans for best use of district assets in the future of the district, including the execution of a facilities bond. So that's where we are in this process and why we are in this process. So as superintendent, you've charged me with providing you my best recommendation for your consideration. And so we have come up with a plan, and Dan will talk to you about the timeline and how we arrived at the plan. But essentially, we're going to give you our best recommendation, and then it's up to you as to how you want to move forward. So I'm going to let Dan start, and then the two of us are going to sort of tag team throughout the presentation. Tonight's presentation is to the board, and it's for the board's questions so that we can prepare ourselves for the January 11th workshop when we have board and community together and we start talking about the specifics.
So when we're looking at a bond, we're really looking at improving our facilities for a long period of time, not a real quick fix. It's, it's been 30 years since we've done a major remodel. So it's that type of time frame. If we look at the time frame, we need to look at the finite dates in here. And the first is the resolution filing date with Island County, which is February 24th, if we want to have this presented to the public on April 25th, which requires the school board to pass a board resolution prior to that date so I can drive it up and hand it to them, which gives us between now and February 22nd to talk about this, have workshops, talk to the community, get feedback, et cetera. A little bit about the planning process. We actually started this in 2019. Started looking at facilities, looking at what we thought needed to be done. And then COVID shut down for a while and we started again approximately a year ago. We've looked at the facilities, what needs to be updated, what things might be missing based upon program needs, a lot of conversation about, what's happening today in our schools as opposed to the last time we did this. And then enrollment, where are we going? Where are we? What are our needs? Those type of things. And then midway through the process, we hired an architectural firm called Integris. and brought them on board to give us the technical expertise. So if we're looking at these projects, how do we create a cost analysis for roof of the high school or siding or whatever it might be? They actually brought in engineers and looked at our electrical systems, our plumbing systems, our heating systems, and came back with recommendations of what needed to be done and what things were actually in pretty good shape that we didn't have to worry about, so that we weren't just fixing some things and leaving things that were going to cause us problems later on alone. And we're now in kind of the recommendation refinement process where we start sharing where we're at, what we've learned, and getting feedback from the community, staff, students, et cetera. If we look at the age and conditions of our facilities, you'll notice the top two. And when we talk about the bond proposal, we predominantly are spending money in this building and in the secondary campus. So the top is what used to be referred to as a high school, now the middle school and high school. And you can see that it was originally built in about 1980, a slight remodel around 1990, and an addition 1995. That was the last time any work had been done in that facility. This building opened in 1987, and it is still the original building with no additional work done other than maintenance throughout the year. This graph actually shows a 50-year lifespan for public buildings, which is quite long, but you'll see that even in that 50 years, we're pretty much towards the end of that span. OSBI uses a 30-year building condition lifespan for their purposes, which is actually less than what we have right now. You see that this school is almost 40 years old. The original high school, over 40 years old. And the last remodel in our newest part of our school was in the mid-1990s, which is 27 years ago. And by the time we get to a bond, which will be several years down the road for the construction, it will advance even further.
So we have 6 pillars that we have been working on in terms of what this bond is about. And they are our guiding principles. And so one of the things that we have talked about in the past, and I know our students are quite concerned about, and so is our community, is we want a welcoming building. We want our buildings to look good. We want pride of place. We want to be able to look at our facilities and be proud. So we also want to have a very specific spot for our 6th through 8th grade. We want that identity for our middle school, for our high school, and for our elementary school. So welcoming and identity, major pillar. Of course, we're in the 21st century now, 22 years into the 21st century. So we want our facilities to be accommodating to 21st century learning. So how can we modernize our facilities to meet those needs? And I'm going to stop here just for 1 second and talk a little bit about something that has come up a couple of times, which is why would you reface our buildings rather than simply build a new building? And there are a variety of reasons for that. Number one, we have a facility and we can remodel it, and we can do it for a lot less dollars. So to rebuild just the 612 facility, it would be probably $250 million. That's what the estimate was. In addition, we are limited to building a building that is for our current enrollment. So we would never be able to match the size and scope of what we currently have, because that building was built at a time when this district was at its highest enrollment. So we would lose a lot. And we really, based on the process that we've gone through, believe that we can update our buildings to a standard that we can be really proud of. So there have been some questions about that, and I wanted to clear that up. Classrooms for today's learning. How do we, and you'll see some photos, how do we modernize our classrooms to make them up to date for 21st century today's classrooms? Wayfinding and safety. Again, how do we create a flow for traffic? We need to repave all of our parking lots. We need to create a safer environment, update our perimeter, do things like that. So wayfinding and safety, also a priority. Things that you don't see, but you certainly feel around operations and maintenance. warm buildings in the winter, cooler buildings in the warm weather, buildings that are energy efficient up to code, up to standard for being green. So that's a piece of this. And then an inclusive environment for all of our students. So how do we make sure that we have restrooms that are up to code, restrooms that are single use? How do we improve our playgrounds for our students who may have limited mobility? How do we do that? How can we update our outdoor education facilities so that all of our students are able to participate effectively? So those are the things that are driving what we're doing around the bond. I'm going to go back to Dan now, and he's going to talk to you about some of the specifics and where we go from here.
So as we move into this presentation, I'll start showing you some photos of pictures of what things could look like. So first I'll show you what currently exists and then conceptually what we might be doing. These are not specific to South Whitby. That specific concept will be created after or if a bond gets passed. Then we would do the design work with a lot of community intervention in that process. So these are just photos. So the first one is, we've heard a lot about, the facade of our secondary building and what it looks like. And, it's very attractive, but we could do something to make it look different. And these are possibilities. So we change the siding, possibly change windows, brighten it up, make it look more modern, much more inviting. If we want to talk about pride of place, this alone, I think, is one of the major factors that would help with that type of thing.
And again, it's not just about the aesthetic. We know that siding and the roof have come to the end of their useful life. So that's a big piece of why this has to occur.
And then if we look at our courtyard in the same building, you can see the condition that it's in. And again, possibilities of what it could look like. The one on the bottom is the one I'm attracted to, and that if we're redoing the siding anyways, and we redo the hardscape, you can actually make a very attractive place that I think our students would like to be in, as opposed to what we see on the other side. So again, conceptual drawings of things that could be. We also know that we need to improve the stadium field and the track facility. There's work that needs to be done, in both of those. And this is just a picture of a, better looking, field, but there are things that we will need to do, press box, and there's some other work in there, and that would be part of this. And then our classrooms, we have classrooms that, need work, could be reconfigured for another purpose potentially, or just a cleanup. And, here's an example of one look at a shop, type classroom compared to another one that's maybe a little more modern, brighter, from my standpoint, a nicer place to learn in, would make it a much nicer process. And then we talk about identity, creating identity for the middle school, identity for the high school. The picture on the left is our current high school entrance. The picture on the right is a doorway that goes into what was formerly referred to as the new commons. So we could use those to create identities. So conceptually, maybe the high school gets a canopy or a structure in front of the entrance that is currently the high school entrance. And the middle school could have a similar structure in their entrance that would identify this is where the middle school resides in this building. So would start to work on that process that they would have their own identity and could create traditions and those type things. And then the wayfinding and safety. It's been 27 years since any asphalt has been, laid in this district. It's cracking, it's falling apart. Traffic patterns have changed in the last few years. We have a lot more parents picking kids up, especially in this building. We need to redesign the way that happens. It's very congested in here. We're running fewer buses than we used to. We could potentially move part of it into that bus zone, make it smaller, make this larger. There's a lot of things we can do to reconfigure the flow to get people in and out of the facility. And then the other part is improving security, different things that we can do to our buildings to make them a safer place. We had talked, this facility needs more capacity for their PE program, because right now they're sharing what is the gymnasium out there for PE and the food service program. So they are limited to the amount of time they can be in the building. And we had talked about building another building here for that purpose. But with the changes at the South Campus, we'll be sitting there with a gym that's fully functional, that's, you know, a short distance away. So there's conversation about, do we put a covered walkway between the two buildings so that, you know, they're not out in the inclement weather as they go back and forth between classes. So it'd be a way to provide a space that is needed here without the large cost of building another structure, since we already have one. And then inclusive environment. If picture on the left is our current play structure we have in the back. You know, been there for a while, made of wood. You realize what happens with wood. It rots and it has nails and all the things that go with that. And it's not very inclusive. It's just really difficult for kids sometimes to use that. So there are other models that we can see that would allow every child the ability to play, not just some. And then the bathrooms, doing the remodel, ADA compliant, single restrooms when feasible in the building. Locker room improvements, all those type things that are kind of in that same category. And then finally, we're looking at building a couple freestanding or attached to building outdoor structures, one here and one at the other campus. And again, it's for use during the day for our students, but it's also, I think, a big use for our community. There's not many places like that where we have that type of facility where the community in the evening, when we're not here on the weekends, could be in a place that is covered from the weather. And I know that our South Campus has a covered play area down there, which is used a lot by a lot of our citizens playing pickleball and some of the other things that they do. So we're, you know, looking at doing some type of structure in each place. The one of the secondary building would also serve purposes for our athletic teams after school. If they needed a place to practice, if they were rained out from the field, they could still do things. Community could use it if they were there to watch events. It'd give them a place to be out of the weather. So there's a lot of reasons why these would be very effective. One thing I do want to mention that we are looking at all kinds of things. And this happens to be a House and Senate bill that is requiring public facilities, buildings of 20,000 square foot and above, which is what these buildings are, to meet energy performance targets. And if we can't meet those targets, then there's some financial implications to the organization. So as we go through and we look at what we're doing to the buildings, we're not meeting those targets today, but with the energy changes with HVAC systems and some of those type things, it would get us towards that target, if not actually get us there. So we're trying to build that process also into this bond, because there's no way that as a district we could afford to pay for this otherwise. And it's one of those unfunded mandates that we are required to get to, and it comes in over the next 4 years or so, but it's something that part of the process in this design concept. And that's why we look at maintenance and operations. It's basically replace the mechanical systems in both buildings for energy efficiency. So we try to meet those standards, but it's also providing comfort to our staff, our students, our community, so that you're in a room that is not freezing and you don't have to wear a coat, or is not so hot that you can't think. And we have both extremes, right? A lot of our heating systems are old electric heating systems with no cooling capacity. So they are only, there for heat. And so we're looking at those across the district. And then also, this is one of the big things. This is the high school roof. There's parts of this that was installed in 1997 when they did the addition 27 years ago. It's starting to have failures in it, and we need to make sure our buildings are dry. And so re-roofing this thing, people say, well, why don't you do it with the levy? You have a levy. Well, we would have to save all of our levy funds for capital purposes for 10 years in order to do this roof and do nothing else in the district, which means we'd fall behind in everything else that we work on. So it's something that has to be done at the bond just because of the size and the cost of it. It's a 150,000 plus square foot building, very large building. When we look at priorities, we're looking at very broad priorities. So we're not looking at, talking about carpeting or something in room 101. We're talking about interior upgrades, exterior upgrades, kind of these big buckets. And then after the bond, we would then refine exactly what those look like. But at this facility, we're talking about building improvements outside of the building. If you look at it, the sidings having failures, there's things going on that we need to address. Looking at it as an inclusive playground, replacing the one we have in the back, ADA compliant restrooms, heating, cooling systems in here, reconfiguring, repaving our whole outside parking area, a covered outdoor educational structure in the back, maybe a covered walkway between the two buildings, upgraded controls for our heating systems to try to meet those energy standards, and then interior flooring upgrades. So looking at a lot of different things in this building. In the secondary building, a lot of the same things. Joe had mentioned that the siding is failing. There are places where you can actually pull it away from the walls. We have to fix those things. And while we're there, looking at, do we replace the windows? It'd be a good time if you're replacing the siding. Do we need to do, window work? Building some type of structure canopy to identify the entrances for each of the high school and middle school programs. Again, a covered outdoor educational structure with maybe storage, because they need some storage capacity there, an inclusive playground, the ADA compliant single-use restrooms, locker room upgrades, the roofing replacement, heating and cooling system upgrades, reconfiguring and repaving the parking lots in front of that one also, upgrades to the stadium field track, whatever that looks like. And then classroom reconfigurations. So it's reusing some of the spaces we currently have rather than adding new spaces to make them more appropriate for the needs we have today as opposed to what they needed in 1987. We need more student support spaces, so incorporating that into this plan. Again, flooring upgrades, system controls, and then the courtyard upgrade. So those are kind of the big picture, and then the details would come later for those. So when we talk about a construction project, there's two pieces of this when we look at the funding costs of a project. The first is the construction costs. How much is a contractor going to charge you to build whatever it is that we're building? The other part is that with a bond, if we get it passed in 2023, we may not start construction until 2024 or later. So there's the possibility of inflation. That cost that was $100 a day might be $110 next year, $115 the following year. So we have to plan for that because it takes time to get this process in. And the other is the soft costs. There are things that are not in the construction cost. So we get a bid from a contractor for a project. They don't include the bond costs, which we paid Island County to run a bond, or the design fees for an architect, or if we have furniture equipment included in that project, that's normally not in there. Sales tax is never included in a bid document. It's always added on after the fact. There's permits, management fees, mitigation fees, special inspections. We're doing a project in Langley, and the Langley inspector couldn't inspect certain aspects of the work we had done because they weren't qualified and didn't have the certificate to do that. So we had to hire somebody to come off island to do that work. So there's things that we will have to do that you may not realize that happens. There may be temporary improvements. If we're still using a building and we're working on the outside of it, we're going to make it safe for students to enter and exit that building. So we may have to build some structures or whatever it might be. And then there's those things that are unknown. It's like you open a wall up and what do you find inside it? Okay, it's asbestos. We now do abatement, right? Or you open a roof up and there's a structural problem that is unknown. So you have to have capacity for those type things. So there's a lot of other little pieces in there. So what we're looking at is an $80 million bond. So out of that $80 million in today's dollars, about 45 of that is the construction costs. That, here's the cost of building something. And then we build in inflation so that if it takes us 3 years to get to the end of the projects, that 45 million becomes roughly 53 million because of the inflation escalation. And that's 6% the first year, 4% the following year. Inflation right now was 7.7% for last year. So you don't know what that is, but you have to plan for it. And then soft costs. They're telling us that soft costs is about 50% of the construction costs. And that's where all those other things and having capacity for unknown. which I think is the biggest part of it. You never know what you're going to find. And we'll talk about that a little later tonight when I ask you to change something on the project in Langley. So that gets you to your $80 million. And that's the amount that we would say to the community, this is what we would like to ask for. Oops. So how do you pay for a bond? Well, it's a rate based on the assessed value of your property. And currently in this school district boundaries, we have about $5.8 billion worth of assessed value, which is very high for a small community like ours. But it's going to about 7.2 billion next year. And that's a 22.4% increase, which I actually checked that with several real estate companies, and they're saying that's about the price increase they've seen in the sale prices of houses in the last year. They have increased by that amount. So I think it's a very legitimate assessed value. So basically the way it works is the $80 million would be repaid over 20 years. So on your tax bill for the next 20 years, you would have a certain amount for this particular bond. And that tax rate would equate to about 70 cents per $1,000 of value. So for a typical homeowner, if you had a house worth $500,000, it would be about $29 per month for this bond, or roughly about $1 per day. And that's how much it would cost. If your house costs more or less, you can do the math that, increase or decrease that amount.
So that's where we are at this time. Just to bring you back to how we got here, there's been a committee working on this. I want to thank Dan and JJ because they've been working on this since 2019. We've also had administrators, teaching staff, and support staff as part of it. I have talked with our leadership students, particularly at the high school. Also have talked with my superintendent's advisory team. So we've had some student input so far, but as Dan has let you know, the idea here is that we get it to a point where the board is ready to say, this is the amount that we're willing to put before the taxpayers to vote on. And then once, assuming that's approved, once that happens, then in the next phase is to design and to develop scope and to figure out the specifics. Some things that have been talked about in detail are the siding, the roof at the high school, the structures that Dan went over, the stadium improvements that are necessary. So we have information, and we have been working with architects and engineers, but this is the broad scope. The other thing we're asking for, and specifically from staff, are for them to send us their questions so that we can develop an FAQ, because people have questions like, well, why, like I brought up earlier, why refurbish instead of building a new building? Well, it's cost prohibitive to build a new building, and we have structures and we can refurbish them. And so that's our recommendation. Again, the board may take us in a different direction. That's up to the board. So that's where we are right now. We wanted you to have the information so you can ponder it. This will be online. We certainly, obviously, any questions you have or things you want to make sure we know tonight, but on January 11th, we will workshop it with you so that we can get into more depth. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moshe and Mr. Pullman. Much, much appreciated. Any conversation, questions, or inquiries that feel really relevant in this moment before we move forward?
So I recognize how strange this will sound, given that it's an $80 million proposal, but given the number of buildings that we're wanting to touch, from my perspective, this feels a little low on our ask. And I'm wondering, I trust the committee, I trust the work that the team put in, but I just want to make sure that if this is the bond we're going to run, and this is, hopefully the bond we have for 20 years and we don't have to run another, I just want to make sure that this encompasses the projects that we foresee, not just currently what we're looking at now, but also what may come up over the course of that 20 years. And so as strange as it sounds to say like this seems low. I just want to let you know that from my perspective, I would be open to ensuring that we are covered across the district, even if that number goes higher.
I just want to acknowledge that this presentation includes a lot of the very specific points that I've heard the community raise as concerns, and that I've heard students raise as concerns, including the key, siding and roof and windows, but also aesthetic things like the condition of the pavement and so on. So I really appreciate that the folks who did the work to get us to this point have been listening and incorporating that feedback from community and students. Thanks.
I have a process question. It seems like there are a few plans that involve or that presume that we know what we will be doing with the South Campus, which we tabled as part of the reconfiguration plan. So in what order would we need to decide what we want to do with the South Campus and decide what goes into the bond?
So we are only focused on the buildings that we anticipate having students in. That's where we're focusing our energy. We have limited it because it is the first bond that this community has faced in 30 years. So twofold answer to your question. We're going with the very basic needs. The first pass at this bond was closer to 100 million. It felt like too big an ask, but that's up to the board. We can show you all the detail for that. So that's to answer your question. In terms of process, again, we're only focused on the facilities where students will be housed. So we have not brought the South Campus up in terms of what's the potential for it. So again, districts run multiple bonds. So that would be a consideration for the board in the future if it chose to do that. Again, I want to be really clear that all of our efforts over the past many years of having a capital levy, we have done much maintenance. So it's not as though we have not done things to our buildings. What we're looking at in this bond are things that are way too big for the capital levy. And JJ's done an outstanding job maintaining our facilities. And this bond proposal includes infrastructure that would carry the buildings. Because we had a question today, for example, from the high school about what about being up to code? What about the mechanical stuff? What about the infrastructure in the building? Are you taking that into account, given that it's 30 years old? And the answer is yes. We have architects and engineers that have walked these buildings. We have maintenance folks who know these buildings. So we are putting out there for you what we believe will carry our buildings that 30 years. It doesn't mean that's the only thing, but that's what we're attempting to do is help you with that forethought. So I don't know if that really answers your question. We're thinking first things first, and that is the student housing.
Yeah, it answers it pretty well. And it also kind of gives me some thought, or potentially, I guess, a request for the workshop, because this is probably too big of a follow-up question for right now, which is how are we certain that the projects that we've chosen for the bond proposal is the highest return on investment of the funds that we plan to ask, however we choose to define return on investment. So it's kind of a big question, probably something to ponder between now and the workshop.
Well, and that would be, I would go right back to the board's goal for us, as well as the 6 pillars that we have developed in terms of our priorities for you to really consider what is your return on investment. So yeah, I think we can certainly talk about that at the workshop because it is a big question.
I would also point us back to the community. And what has the community been telling us? That we need to do these things to our buildings. And then we took it further saying, okay, but we also need energy efficiency. We need, here's the other things that aren't as flashy as what the outside may look like. And, what has our students been telling us? They've been giving Dr. Moshe a lot of feedback about, what would make them more proud of their facility? What would make them want to be there? And those are a lot of things that we've been listening to in this process. And I give the committee a lot of credit. They've been really sensitive to the community as far as, these are things we need. And we understand it's a big ask for the dollar amount. So we didn't go to things that were, oh, that'd be really fun to have. It was more of, these are what we need to do to provide the level of facility that our students and our staff deserve and that our community could be proud of.
I just wanted to say, I'm appreciative of definitely like the attention to pride of place in the presentation, such as new exterior. I've also heard a lot of concerns about heating, especially this past month with colder weather. And then while I was at the elementary school, I also heard concerns about the outdated play structures and not being accessible. So I really appreciated seeing those in the presentation. I would also like to say I completely agree with Andrea. I think it's important to make sure that we have an adequate amount of funds, especially since it's going to be such a long time until we have the opportunity to pass another bond. And there's so many uncertainties with like climate change and clean energy requirements that might change like projects we need for the building in the future that we just like aren't aware of now. So I think it's really important to make sure that when we're putting this bond out, we have enough to cover projects, say for the next 20, 30 years.
Well, and Audrey, just a point of clarification, you can run multiple bonds at the same time. So we could run this bond and then in 10 years, we could run a second. And there's a lot of districts that do that. What you end up doing though, is getting in a cycle of bonds, which South Whidbey is very unique in having not run a bond, especially in the last 30 years. So we could run multiple, but I think that our community would not be accustomed to that structure.
We should also remember that we still, at this point, have a capital levy that provides us a certain amount of funds each year that we can do things that aren't the large projects, such as, the roof that would take 10 years to pay for. But we can replace a roof on a building at the South Campus. We could replace, all heating units within a building, on a levy basis. So it isn't the only thing that we use to upgrade our buildings. We still have that that levy dollar coming in.
I just did a bid on my roof, Dan, so I can't imagine 150,000
Yeah.
square feet is gonna be.
Yeah, it's incredible sticker shock. So I appreciate that the board is understanding of where we are. I think it's one of those things to gain insight from our community. And one of the things that we're talking about, much like the Parks and Rec group did, you probably saw a survey that came through about what would you support. So something like that, we're going to be putting a survey out to give people sort of the opportunity to chime in on, would you support this? Do you think that's important? But we've talked a lot about at our meetings, turf field for the stadium. And my first reaction was based on what I've heard in our community in the past, which was a reaction to turf. And it wasn't positive, but they've changed turf fields a lot over the past 10 years. They've made them more environmentally friendly. They've provided different resources for them. And what we've also come to find out is that it's about the same money to create a beautiful grass field as it is to create a turf field, except the grass maintenance is not environmentally friendly. A lot of water, fertilizer, but it's also a lot of maintenance. Now there's maintenance for turf, but there's a tremendous amount of maintenance for grass, and you don't get as much use time on grass. So it changed my perspective on where we go in the future. But we need to get that information out to the community and also give them an opportunity to process that and then react to it. So we have things that we need to do to gauge the community's reaction. That's where we are.
I feel it would be interesting at the workshop to see a very brief list of the things that got pulled from the wish list in that process of reevaluating the $100 million number and trying to get it closer to 80. Whether that's a specific list of items that got pulled or whether it's just changing the scope of the current list, I would just be interested in being able to hear some community reflections on that step in your process.
And we have that list. My caution is certainly seeing the list in its entirety. My caution is you will have folks who say, you know, why are you going to replace those windows? They're perfectly fine. And who bid on those windows? And why do you think it's going to be this much money instead of that much money? Or that's not nearly enough, or you're, you know, somebody's blowing smoke at you. Those are the kinds of things that we've spent a lot of time trying to weed through, and we don't really know the actual cost, for example, of the siding on the high school until we have scope, and then still we put it out to bid, which doesn't happen until after you have an approved bond. So yes, we have a very detailed list of all of the things and an approximate cost.
Sure, thank you. I also appreciate that sometimes it's a lot harder to move forward when you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So I realize the importance of having our timeline for reaching a scope and then a decision. And I think you've laid out nicely what the steps are to get from here to there. Thank you.
We also want to make sure that we underpromise and overdeliver. So if we are talking about doing siding and a roof, that we will do siding and a roof. But if we put into the scope every detail, and then as we go along, we say, well, you know, we're going to make a different decision and we're going to choose this particular detail and not that. We want to make sure we're upfront with the public and we're telling them these are not necessarily set in stone. These big buckets are set. So we will do siding, we will do a roof, we will do a play structure, but the exact narrowed down scope of that may be different.
Well, and I just want to clarify that, you know, I trust the committee. I trust the work that you've been doing. I trust that JJ knows his buildings and knows what they need. I just wanted to just put it out there that the number, I'm open to a higher number if that's what you need. And I also trust that you are excellent stewards of taxpayer money. You've demonstrated that over the tenure of our budget, and especially when we look at our budget in comparison to others in the current circumstances, like I have the full trust in it. I just wanted you to know that if that number was higher, you would still have my support.
I also want to know from the board, what more information do you think would be helpful? So we have information, for example, on tax rates in other districts and what our tax rate is compared to other districts. And we are quite low compared to others. Is that something you'd like to see? What are the things that come into your mind that you didn't see here that you think we should include as we go forward?
My first question would be is, have we looked at this roof? And is that something that we need to consider? JJ's like, really? Just put me on the spot there.
Yeah, this roof is it's probably about halfway through its life expectancy, so it's expected another 15 years.
Okay.
The portion where the solar panels will go will get replaced from hip to hip, and this is a roof, you know, in necessary, we could work off of capital as well on. So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's not 150,000 square feet.
In addition to what you mentioned, which I think would be interesting to see, because for a number of reasons, including if the board does decide to approve this project and move it forward, you know, you've already spent a lot of time. It shows in the presentation, it's very detailed. And so if we were to approve the bond, I would like it to pass. And so I would like to see what has passed and what hasn't, and to see if we can improve the odds of it passing if we choose to do it. Another thing I would like to see would be contingency plans for if the bond doesn't pass. How do we become compliant with the new energy efficiency standards? Do we use levy money? Do we, yeah, stuff like that. What are the types of things that we would really have to do, even if the bond doesn't pass, and how would that factor into our budget?
That sounds like a spooky story that would have been better suited for Halloween.
The first thought I was like, I said, we find $80 million is what we do, Joe.
Katja or Audrey, any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, so you mentioned a survey to send out to community members, and I think making a separate survey for students, especially the younger students who will be using these facilities as they're improved, would be very important, because as they're the ones that will use it, seeing what they want. And even if they don't look at, let's say, the money in the budget and they don't see the roof, just asking them what they want. Because when Audrey and I went to go talk to them, it was a lot about heating and it was a lot about the water in the schools. And that's sometimes something that's overlooked. But making sure that the student voice is really there is incredibly crucial.
Thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to our workshop on the 11th, and really making a plan for myself to make sure as many people know about it as possible. I don't know, maybe we bring the band back. I don't know. But let's see how many folks we can get in the room to have a conversation, because a lot of the conversations in the community in the last couple of years have been very casual. Here's what I think should happen. Or someone notices the state of the siding or the building, and we'll talk to a board member about it, or we'll talk to another parent about it. So I love that we're formalizing this construct of what we want to see happen to our buildings and making it really clear that we'd like to see these changes come to pass. And what that's going to take is a very concerted effort by our entire community to say yes to this bond. So I feel like having all the technical details so that I can be out in the community, really speaking clearly to our constituents around taking their thoughts and their vision to this next place of clarity of purpose. And so passing the bond is of the utmost importance. Thank you for your hard work so far. And thank you all for your hard work so far.
I completely agree with what Katya said. I think it's super important to heavily promote this workshop and these surveys. So like the concerns people have shared through the past year are on the table and they're heard. And also just letting people know that, you know, the clock is ticking on the bond and there's really not much time left to have these voices set at the table. So letting them know like kind of the urgency behind this and why it's so important to attend the workshop.
Thank you. And we will start to make sure that folks know about the 11th. We're also doing a session on the 18th, which is an off week for the board, but it'll be a community conversation around the bond. And then the following week will be another board meeting where we'll bring it up again. And then there's a workshop in February. And then finally, the business meeting in February where the board has to make a decision. So we are putting that information out there. Just a reminder, the board, obviously, if the board is seeking a vote of the community on a bond, it is because the board believes the bond is really important to pass. Reminded staff today that as a staff, it's our obligation to encourage people to vote. And we stop there as employees of the district. As individual citizens, we can certainly tell people what we think personally, but we are not to use any district resources to promote a vote one way or the other, but to promote folks to vote and express their opinion. So that's just a reminder for all of us on what our limitations are. Students have no limitations. They don't, right? The students are free to express their opinion. But as employees and officers of the district, we have a little bit different set of expectations.
Appreciation for that clarification.
The board does have the opportunity, like with a levy, to actually sit as a board and indicate whether or not it supports its levy or bond. So it'll become clear what the board thinks. So anything else that I'm missing? Okay, so we will see you back here on this topic, January 11th. Thank you
you
to
so much.
Dan and JJ for all their work.
And if you do think of other questions in the meantime, feel free to email them. We'll create a FNQ for people so they can start seeing some of these questions and answers. And
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. We'll give Dr. Moshe a moment to reset here. And we have one more item of business in this part of the agenda. We as board members are to review a letter to our legislature. And so I will give the floor back to you, Dr. Moshe.
And Christy, do you have that document? So we have a document that we put together based on the facts as we know them around current proposed legislation. I sent this document to the board just so you'd be able to read it in advance, so you could come here tonight with any comments you may have. I also sent the board a document that came out from Everett Public Schools. We are in a situation where the current proposals are just that. They are proposals. So the legislature begins its session in January, as our legislative rep knows. And so the board has scheduled itself, along with its student representatives and superintendent, to go down to Olympia in February for the Day on the Hill. So this letter is something that Dan and I drafted for the board. The information in it is accurate. The question is, do you want to send it? This is not the night you vote on it. This is the night you tweak it. We would come back in January at the business meeting. And by then you can choose whether or not you want to send this and in what format. Should bullet points? Do you want to hand carry it to the Hill when you go in February? So there is no urgency. And I also believe some things may change by the time we get into session. So with that being said, this is a letter that we drafted. The highlighted areas are just for consideration. There's no right or wrong. It's really the information we've given you is as far as we know it in terms of what the state proposals are.
Right. I already saw Marnie over there with her editing eye tapping away. And just Director Williford, Brooke also said that he had done a little bit of editing as he looked at the letter earlier this week before he left for vacation. I'm wondering if that's the tan parts. Is
Yeah.
that Brooks?
Is that, Christy, you have it all in there, right? Yep. Yeah, those are the highlighted and tan parts, absolutely. And yeah, he, again, individual board members making comment. He is the only one who made comment because he wasn't going to be here. So there was no discussion yet. This is your opportunity.
Correct.
I guess I'll start. I personally am in favor of sending a letter, and I understand that the facts may change, but I trust that the letter will be factual at the time it is sent. My concern with the current letter as written is it is fairly wonky, and I mean that in the sense that it's very detailed. And I want to keep in mind the audience, our three elected officials, or a senator and two representatives. They're probably all very busy. They're probably understaffed. One representative-elect will be very new on the job. And so I want to make sure that the letter kind of has a punch, that it's, if they only read the first paragraph and then decide they're too busy to read the rest, like I want to make sure it really summarizes the situation that the proposal will, the harm that this proposal will do to our district and districts like ours across the state. So yeah, it really is just sort of editing, wordsmithing. The letter itself, I think is great, and I believe in the power of the pen.
You also mentioned there were several different touch points we could use with touching base with our elected officials, and looking at that other document that was sent as well, I believe the Everett School District, like the point by point bulletin. I see the value of both of those. I see this letter as being a very formal construct around this is the absolute data, whatever that absolute data ends up being. But that other more colorful, more striking, less, wonky, wordy document, I think also has value. And maybe that's what we carry with us on the day, or maybe that's another presentation or another touch point.
I would also, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Marnie, but certainly 2 board members could work on this letter and then present it back to the rest of the board. That is a way to do this as well. So if, for example, Joe, if you and Marnie wanted to wordsmith it and come back with bullet points, then the board could consider it. That would not violate open public meetings in any way.
I think that combination would put together a very well thought out and articulate message.
I also, I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of school districts facing a similar existential threat in this moment. And there are a lot of people collaborating to understand how best to come with a unified voice to our elected officials. And so I think that there's value in sending a letter specifically from the South Whidbey perspective about the implications here. And there's also value in having our elected officials see similar letters from other districts. I imagine that I'll also come as our legislative representative to ask us to be signatories on some kind of concise one-pager that represents the positions of multiple districts. That's kind of in formation now, but especially ferry-served school districts are gathering together to put their minds together and understand what specific defined request could actually make all of our circumstances better. Instead of just a general no, not this sort of stance. And so I just would like to say that I hope whatever kind of letter we send as South Whidbey School District can match the facts and the ask that might go into a collaborative, shorter document that we partner with other districts to create.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the road I would suggest that you go down. I also think it's really impactful and important that our student representatives understand the impact and are able to articulate that for that day on the Hill. Because I think it's very powerful when students not only understand what's happening in their district, but can share that on a personal level. So all of those things I think are important. The unified letter of like impacted districts, a specific letter from South Whidbey, and the message on the Hill delivered by our 2 formidable student reps.
To Director Downs's earlier point, I'd be happy to work on the letter.
I'd be happy to collaborate on that as well.
Student reps, anything for the good of the group at the moment?
I would very much appreciate at one of the mentor meetings going over it with Joe and Brooke, so Audrey and I can have a better understanding of really what this is and how it's affecting us.
Be happy to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. I gained like a pretty good understanding at the Small Schools Forum during the WASA conference, as well as I actually talked to the Mercer Island student rep, and they discussed a letter about regionalization they sent out. So I kind of was reflecting on that. It'd be really great to meet in a mentor meeting and discuss this in more depth.
I would also suggest that that we include Dan in that, because he's quite articulate on the actual impact to South Whidbey.
Will do.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a plan. and some tasks to do. Thank you everyone for that good discussion. If we're ready, we can move on to public comment. If you are virtual with us and you would like to make a public comment, you can do so in the question and answer chat box. Go ahead and put your name and your location first, because it might take you a little time to type away. And then we are happy to read your comment. If you're here live in the room, you can sign up with Christy in the back if you haven't already, and then you will be invited to come up. There's a 5-minute limit to those comment sessions. And remember, this is not a call and response or a discussion space. This is your opportunity as a community member to share with us some of your thoughts and then follow up with us or follow up within the school district as is appropriate to your question or inquiry. And you can always email a board member first if you have a question, and we are happy to lead you to the right space if need be. So waiting, no questions open on the virtual chat yet. Christy, do you have anybody on your list? Okay, we will give our 5 guests in attendance a little bit more time just in case they have something to offer. But I don't see anything popping up. Okay, I don't see anything and Christy doesn't have anything. So we can move on to a new business item. We have tonight memorandum 2223-04, approval of change of orders for the Langley Middle School gym retrofit project. So I give that back to you and to probably Mr. Pullman as well.
I defer to Dan on this one.
Can I defer to JJ?
You can defer to JJ if you want. He loves when we defer to him, Dan.
Yeah, so what this is the community center gym retrofit project. We've run into a few conditions that were unknown when we did the RFP. First, we ran into an asbestos problem, and I had asked you prior for a 10% contingency. The abatement of that alone took $60,000 out of roughly $100,000. There's some other minor things, moving things that weren't in the scope for another about 20,000. So we're at about roughly 75,000 right now. And then this week we came up with a change order which had to do with the ducting system for the HVAC. So as they took it down, they realized that putting it back up would be near impossible due to the condition of the sheet metal itself. So there's a proposal to replace the sheet metal in the gymnasium with new ducts. And then there's also some changes that had to be made. As the fire marshal came through, he realized that the size of our fire dampers in the HVAC system were undersized and is requiring us to increase those, which is an additional cost. And we talk about additional costs, almost everything is $40,000 every time we add one of these processes in there. And then there's a movement of the ducts that went through the floor because they didn't realize that in the wall were concrete columns that they couldn't get through until they started to open the floor up because they had to move the columns out 15 inches. And when they did that, they didn't realize that they ran into things. So there's all these unknown things that they ran into that running to about $100,000. So what I'm requesting is to change it to 25%. I don't think we'll go that high. I think it's closer to 18%, but we're getting close to wrap this project up. I think we'll be done within the next 4 weeks. And they might get to the point that we can finish it before we have another board meeting. So I'm asking for a little more capacity than I think we really need. Certainly we won't spend it if it doesn't happen. And then we also need to clean the ducts. As they took them apart, we realized that they probably haven't been cleaned ever. And they were full of not just dust, but all kinds of things. So again, it's another $20,000 to clean the existing ducts in the remainder of the building. Don't have to clean the ducts in the new part, but there is a lot of ducting in the lower part of the building that, you know, we should clean at this time. There's no reason to not clean it while everything's open. So that's the request. Any questions I could answer for you on that particular thing?
Any questions for Dan?
I just want to say I ate a pickle sandwich in that building every day in 1991 and 1992. So it's probably a good idea to clean up.
I think I found your pickle.
It sounds like based on the where we are in the project, the likelihood of this is low, but what's the likelihood of this becoming like a money pit where we keep with costs keep going up and up?
I don't anticipate any other change orders. We are almost completely finished. The roof will most likely be done, if not by tomorrow, by mid next week. If you drive by, you'll see that one side is completely done. They still have to do the lower gutters. There's basically the ductwork left inside. And I think they are planning to do cleanup as far as the construction piece the week after Christmas. So I think we are almost there. I think the ductwork is the big part that is the unknown that is left that we haven't approved yet. Otherwise, I don't believe we're going to see anything of any major value.
I would also add that having been through several bond projects in my career, change orders are inevitable, and you're going to see a lot of them as we go through the bond.
Yeah, I was going to say that this we can use this as a learning lesson for the types of cost overruns we could expect if we approve a bond.
That's why we build that kind of capacity. You saw it's $43 million in construction costs, and the rest is the rest.
Any other discussion or questions before we move to a vote?
I just want to say I have so much trust and faith in your judgment and expertise on these matters. Thank you.
All right, student reps, would you like to add anything? And yeah, would you like to add anything before we move to a vote? Okay. Then can I get an advisory vote from you, Katja?
Aye.
Thank you.
And I think we have to have a motion first.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed a
Okay.
step.
I'm still thinking about what was in the ducks. I would move to approve memorandum. I can't see it. My computer has died.
22-2304.
22-2304.
Okay.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve memorandum 22-2304. I'm asking for an advisory vote. Katja?
Aye.
Thank you, Katja. And Audrey?
Aye.
Thank you, Audrey. All right. All those in favor of approving the change orders for the Langley Middle School gym retrofit project, memorandum 22-2304, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. The memorandum is approved as written. Okay, thank you so much. All right, moving to reports and back to the news desk with Mr. Dan Pullman.
Are you doing it? I want to. I don't know if I can. Okay, so this is our report for the month of November, and we'll include the December 1st enrollment. If we look at enrollment year to date, you can see that our average is about 1151, and that includes our basic education and our ALE. On the bottom part, the basic education enrollment number is about 1,079, with about 72 of that being in our ALE program. Still substantially about 40 FTE above our budget. So that's a very positive thing as we move into this fiscal year. We did add additional costs, realizing that we had more kids with personnel costs, but it will certainly be offset by the enrollment. Next. Just the enrollment pattern. You can see that, we went up a little bit, and then in December, we're basically flat from November. So we're not growing anymore, but the good thing is, it didn't drop. So that's very positive. Next. And then just by location, this is the current month. You can see how many students we have in each of our different entities, which is what OSBI refers to as our high school program, our middle school program, our elementary program, et cetera. About 352 in the high school, with another about 28 in the SWA program in the high school. 182 at the middle school, 362 in this building, 159 roughly at the South Campus. And it gives you the breakdown of where our ALE students are at. Predominantly, most of those are the South Woodby ALE students. We only have a few that are going to Spokane Virtual Academy, but most of them are the program we have here. If you have questions, be sure and stop me. Next. We're a fourth of the way through the school year. This is our 25%. So our revenues at 5.1 million, our expenditures is about 5.5 million. So we are spending, more than we are getting in revenue. Couple reasons for that. First is we have several federal grants that haven't been approved yet, so I can't claim. Has to do with a change to a new program they have that is taking forever to get grant approval. So we will see a bump, I'm hoping in January when we can actually start claiming grants. And the other thing is that we are planning on using $1.3 million worth of fund balance. That was part of the budget process. We knew we were going to do that. And then the bottom is just the revenues by month. You can see it's very similar to where we were last year as far as the dollar amounts. And then the expenditures slightly higher, but not much than we were last year at this time. Next. Breakdown of revenue comparison by year, how much we're getting from local property taxes, local revenue from the state. And you see the state money has gone down. And again, that's because of the drop in regionalization and enrollment numbers. State special purpose is tied to state numbers, again, enrollment and the same factors. And then our federal dollars should actually be higher than last year. But again, we haven't been able to claim those yet because the approval process at OSPI is not working as it should at this time. Next. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard that one before.
I got my title approval yesterday, but I have not received the funds either, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I hear that the
It's a-
claiming is really hard with that.
I recognize I'm wearing my public hat right now and it's a horrible system.
Yes, everybody agrees. So if we look at it with encumbrances, you can see that the non-employee costs are about 43% of budget, the employee costs at about 99%. Totally, we're at about 89.5%. Next. And this just breaks down how do we spend our funds: certificated staff, classified staff, the employee benefit costs, supplies, services, and travel. And as we always point out, employee costs are the majority of where our dollars are spent. But it gives you an idea of, are those categories up or down based on our previous year. You can see our certificated salaries are down slightly, and we did go through a reduction process. Classified salaries are up slightly, benefits are up, and the others are quite similar to where we have been. Next. Fund balance. We're basically at where we were last year. We're around 22% at this time, with the expectation that it will actually decline because that revenue expenditure difference of $1.3 million will cause that to go down as we get through the end of the year. Next. Budget status. Our current fund balance is about $4.9 million. So it's slightly down from the beginning of the year at about 5.3. We are spending money as we're going through. And that does also include the fact that you can see that the local taxes, we have collected 1.4 million. So we get about half in the fall, half in the spring. So we've got a lot of that money already come in November. So that's kind of your excess month between November and December in those funds. But it gives you a breakdown by program. Next. It's another way of looking at the same dollar amount. Still comes with a $4.9 million fund balance, but it gives you your assets and liabilities. The one thing that you see new this year on here is a thing called leases receivable. And you see that as an asset and a liability, and it's approximately $143,000. We are now recording and reporting to OSPI, and SAO will actually audit us on the leases we have with other entities. So whether we're leasing something to somebody or we're leasing something from somebody, we will now record those on our financial statements. Doesn't affect your bottom line, your fund balance, because it's an offset of asset and liability, but it's just another reporting requirement that they put in place. I won't comment on that one at all. Other than it takes a lot of time. We have a lot of leases with the community center. Next. And then the other funds, capital projects currently has 2.267 million in there. We have projects that, you know, are going on. We also have quite a bit of revenue that is owed to us from the state for the project at the community center. We've been paying those out of capital projects. I've been submitting invoices to the state and we haven't received any payment since about March. So there are several $700,000 worth of accounts receivable coming from those. And, you know, I've asked them to please check into why we're not getting those reimbursements on a timely basis. They will get back to me. So anyway, so we actually have more money in that account than we should, because we just received, you know, basically half of our annual capital projects levy fund in November. Debt service, I transferred $8,250 at the 1st of November. We have a payment at the 1st of December. ASB has about $94,000 in there currently. Transportation vehicle fund, 150,000, and it will basically just sit there like that until we get to August and we get a payment from OSBI. And then private purpose trust fund, which is student scholarship dollars, has about 793,000 in there. So it's a very nice balance. Next, I guess that's it. Any questions I could answer for you? Great.
Thank you. Yeah, just some appreciation for that new slide deck you got there. Some aesthetic changes. Well done, friend. All right, let's hear from our student board members, Katja and Audrey.
Okay, so we haven't had a student report in a while, and there's been a lot happening at all the school districts. So I'll start with high school. Currently, we're in the middle of the winter sports season. So that is boys and girls basketball and wrestling. And we are having Spirit Week this week. And I'm pretty sure all the schools are doing some sort of Spirit Week, which is just a fun way to dress up and have fun. At the high school, we have 2 drives going on at the moment. Well, one of them ended today, actually, which is a warm clothing drive. So all the classes did a competition to see who could get the most warm clothing, gently and new, to donate. And then there's a veterans sock drive. So we are donating socks to veterans. Lots of clubs and lots of fundraisers happening. There's bake sales weekly, which is always fun. We are nearing the end of the semester, so classes for first semester are wrapping up and everything's kind of coming to a close, and second semester starts in January. We had Thanksgiving break, and then in the high school we have Winterfest on Friday, which is a fun opportunity for high school students. We have kind of shortened class periods, and then for the second half of the day we got to pick activities that we want to do, like cookie decorating. We can watch movies. There's some of the art rooms like ceramics. So there's a whole bunch of activities to choose from. And then there's lots of after school activities. Like today, there was a grade level competition race. So there's lots of after school things. In the 7th and 8th grade, I talked to some of those kids, and they had a Spirit Week this week that they are really excited about. And they really enjoy dressing up. Their winter sports are ending. So that's boys basketball and girls soccer. Believe girls soccer is over now, and boys basketball has about a few days left. And everyone I talked to said it's going well. They had parent teacher conferences over Thanksgiving break. And now Audrey.
So last week at the high school, I had the opportunity to chair the student council for their first meeting. And the student council is basically representatives from every advisory with ASB. So it's around 40 and 50 students. So it's a really great representation of student voice, especially from the advisories. we discussed kind of like student council, something that's kind of vaguely used from district to district. So we kind of created our own definition of what a student council is and what do we want to accomplish as a council. We also went over specific topics, such as some students brought up vaping issues, specifically in the bathrooms, and how to address those, if we need to like talk about smoking prevention and just et cetera. Then we also brought up the bond, and a few students talked about heating issues because recently, over the past month, it's been extremely cold in the high school, especially in specific classrooms. So they kind of brought that up and having that addressed by the bond, and we saw that in the presentation, which was really great. And we're hoping to set up a meeting as well, and we established a few committees. Katya and I last week also went and visited the K through 4 campus and then the 5 through 6 campus. And at the K through 4 campus, we arrived at the perfect time because the different clubs were meeting. So we got to hear from the art club, the sports club, the drama club, and so the art club is working on a mural, which is really great to hear about. We also heard from the drama club about an MLK play and performance they're putting on for the assembly, which I believe is on January 11th, if I remember it correctly. And then I got to meet with the sports club outside, and I got to hear some concerns they had about the bond and things they'd like to see addressed. For example, the play structure, they're like, oh yeah, it's outdated. They also discussed a new covered area and a structure cover for the sand pits. So that's another one I heard. So it was really great to meet with K through 4. And then we also went down to the 5 through 6 campus where we met with ASB, and I got to hear their vote for like Spirit Day ideas, which is always fun. And then they brought up a few concerns about water accessibility and water fountains at the South Campus, as well as they asked a few questions about the transition to the high school and what it would look like. Are they going to be operating on this? Are 7-8 going to be operating on the same schedule as 6th graders? One student mentioned, is it like the high school where there's like a bunch? Is it like high schools in the movies where there's a bunch of lunch options, which is really funny to me because like I feel like that's a stereotypical thing you see in movies is where it's like a restaurant at high school. So it was fun to be able to answer their questions for the most part, and also hopefully have some of their questions addressed at a later date when I have more formal responses, because there's a lot of things that are just still unknown and we need to decide as a community. So I think that's it for me, unless Katya has anything more to add.
We also went to WASDA, so we just want to share a little bit about WASDA. For me, and the pre-conference program that Joe and I went to, I thought it was really good to get a lot of like the details about how the school board runs and stuff like that. And I've known a little bit and I've been here, so I've been able to listen in, but that was a really informative experience for me. It was also really great to meet other student reps. I think there's 80 some there. And it was really great making those connections in the student rep dinner and then seeing them throughout the conference and discussing them, especially some schools that we're in the same sports conference with and getting their opinions on St. Woodby and getting that perspective from other students. I thought that was really informative, and discussing student voice with other school boards, because a lot of school boards don't have student reps or don't have advisory votes. And there's a lot of details that we were able to share with them to help them improve their school boards and their student voice. So I thought that was really informative. Audrey, do you have something to add?
So this is my second time attending WASDA. It was in Spokane, so slightly different than the Bellevue conference, but like last year, it's so nice to be able to connect with other student reps and kind of establish where you are and where you can improve, especially in my role, and also as a state and like what legislation we need to work on. Last year, student reps came together after the WASDA conference, and they push the state to approve for voting rights for students on the state board. So just being able to see student reps come together and connect and kind of come together in solidarity is always really great. It also made me feel, I would say, a sense of pride in the work our district has done towards student voice, because in one of our sessions, there was a question of how many students have advisory votes on their board. And I believe Katya and I were the only ones who raised our hand. So just being able to see that and like the contrast is really great. And also being able to help encourage other districts to have advisory votes is great as well. I also enjoyed the sessions I attended, such as the Small Schools Forum, where there's a lot of emphasis on bonds as well as regionalization, both major topics our district has been talking about. I thought it was really great to meet with other island districts and discuss regionalization and how it affects, right, these districts that you have to go to on ferries. And then also kind of being able to group together ideas for the day on the Hill. So those are my major points I got from this year's conference. It was an amazing opportunity.
Thank you so much, Audrey. All right, turning it over to our superintendent for her report.
I don't know if I can possibly top that. I just, every time I hear from our two student reps, I just get so proud of their work on behalf of the district. So we are just about to go on winter break for 17 days, and I know we're all looking forward to those days. I had the opportunity, I'm going to talk a little bit about student voice that's come my way, because I continue to have a monthly meeting with the superintendent advisory team, which is currently grades 4 through 8. But I had the opportunity this week to meet with our high school students who are leaders. And there's about 30 of them. And again, our student reps, and they are absolutely consistent with their messaging. Their concerns around vaping in the bathrooms, congregating in the bathrooms, and what can we do about that. Had lots of input around the bond. I was able to give them lots of information as well. So I think they appreciated that. The younger students in 4th through 8th grade that I work with, same thing. They're very insightful students, and they really keep it real for all of us to understand from their perspective how these things that we do impact them. And I'm also trying to figure out ways to follow through on something that both Audrey and Katya said at WASDA that really stuck with me, which is how do we take the work that we do as a board and see it down to the classroom level, because sometimes it just doesn't get there. And so doing work around how to make that happen. So couple things that are also happening in January before we meet again. January 9th and 10th, we have 25 students in grades 7 through 12 who will be engaged in our culture of care training for 2 days. And on that Wednesday, the 11th, the board then is engaging in that training for its retreat. So we're continuing that work, continuing to improve our knowledge around how to use circles effectively. And we've actually had some need to do some restorative conferencing with staff, and that's been effective. So again, we're continuing to move forward. You will hear about our school improvement plans at the February workshop from our principals with some data to update you on how we're doing. So that's it for the superintendent's report.
So Dr. Moshe, one thing that resonated with me was taking things from the board to the classroom level, because not many people know, but I applied for the doctoral program that Dr. Haddon oversaw, specifically because I wanted to learn from her. And the topic that I did not finish it, I dropped out, but the topic that I was going to focus on was exactly that. How do you make policy trickle to the classroom? And it's because Dr. Haddon said, this is an area that needs to be looked at and researched more. So that reminded me of her.
And you're still can do that program.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank you for the
that-
opportunity.
Thank you. On that note, now we're going to go to board comments and reports. We have some folks who did get to attend the WASDA conference recently. And Joe, I know you had some notes on that in a little slide deck. Would you like to start us out?
Yeah, in the interest of time, instead of a full presentation, I'll just give a few highlights. So many of the board members went to WASDA, the Washington State School Directors Association annual conference. And like Katya mentioned, the two of us went to what's called Board Boot Camp, which is for board members who have joined since the previous conference. So it was a really intensive training on board governance, how policy is filtered down from law to the OSPI to us as a district, and then how feedback can filter in the opposite direction to change law. I also went to an equity training, which is compulsory for all board members. And I learned about the difference between equity and equality, how both of them can be used to improve student outcomes, how you can work with people who have different political viewpoints, who may see different ways to achieve equity, to work together, because at the end we all want students to succeed. And then we also looked at some historical context around like the desegregation of schools and the civil rights movement. So again, it was a very intensive training with a lot of materials. In addition, I went to a bunch of breakout sessions around everything from the more details about what the WIAA does and how it supports districts and their athletics and activities, to school lunch programs, to understanding a little more in depth how the budget office works, so I can understand Mr. Pullman's amazing reports. So yeah, very packed few days. Took away a lot of interesting information.
Thank you so much. Marnie, would you like to share?
Yeah, I didn't prepare a presentation, but I just want to share my general gratitude that the district prioritizes this opportunity for its board members and administrators and student representatives. I continue to learn a lot and be inspired each time I attend a conference like this. And I thought that WASDA did an extraordinary job with their theme of belonging. I started the program with a pre-conference session on belonging as a pathway to inclusion. And actually, I believe the subtitle was Dignity as the Path to Inclusion. And I found that that theme really threaded through the whole weekend of addressing educational gaps and structural inequality in our systems, not by looking at what's wrong, but by looking at what's possible when we relate to one another in a way that is empathetic and compassionate and curious. And then what that feeling of belonging in community together makes possible in terms of academic outcomes and general holistic well-being for our students. I thought that the keynote presentations by Jared Kopp and Dr. Adolph Brown were motivating and inspiring. They were timed perfectly in the sense that the first one was, I would say, heavier in the very best way, deeply compelling. And the second one was upbeat and had a bit of a comedy vibe, but also carried a really serious message that was deeply tied to the conference theme. And I also appreciated the opportunity to network and meet other, especially legislative representatives. If I had a constructive critique, it would be that a little bit more unstructured time for that kind of work would have been very welcome. Thank you. Oh, and I know that we're talking about WASDA, but in my board report, I just also want to say that we have the best policy representative in, if not the nation, at least the state. So thank you.
I went to the same pre-conference as Marnie and got a lot out of that and felt like the thread of belonging and dignity went throughout. Two of my big takeaways were that going to that conference in such an environment where everyone is there who has similar lived experience in that we are board members or administrators, it just really reminds me that learning and community building is lifelong. And that's, you know, and it's a model of what our kids do every day and experience every day. And it was so cool to be in that community of learners together. And then the other thing I noticed, almost every session I went to, my thoughts were, my students could present this, or this is an amazing feat that this district did. But and, you know, we are in this place or beyond that place with the work we're doing here. And it just made me feel so proud. And I will say our students are celebrities because they're not kidding when they say that not every district has student representation or student board members, and especially not student board members who are so ready to be out in the center of the circle and, you know, speaking their truth for their fellow students. The amazing work that you do is so powerful. And so once people would read your name tag and say you're from South, we'd be like, oh my God, do you know Audrey and Katja? And it was just the best feeling. It just kept happening. It was awesome. So that's all I'm going to say about the WASDA conference. Audrey, Dr. Moshe, Katja, any last thoughts before we conclude?
I just want to say, I missed you like super much. I was so looking forward. My suitcase had been packed for a week. I was driving here. I got to the light and then I got a call from preschool that my son had a fever. So I turned around. Dan, I'm still trying to figure out how the heck you packed a bag that fast. You had to, because I heard Dan went and I was like, you had like 45 minutes notice.
The other amazing thing is that Christy got him on the flight, got him the hotel room, and got him into the conference with his own name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really quite the feat.
I'm hoping that the other good news I received is that my husband is coming home. Yay. And he should be home in time for WASDA next year. So should my child choose a time where I have something fun and non-refundable planned to get a fever, that I will still be able to go.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Happy holidays.
Yes, indeed. Happy holidays. Travel safe. And this meeting is adjourned.